Today, I'm going to turn Tony Hawk into his very own action figure. Now, why would I do that? Because back in June, Tony flew me out to New York City to film with him. This was for the Mystery Skater series. He covered the flight, hotel, food, he really hooked it up. But more than all that, throughout the entire series, every time I released a new episode, he would share it with all of his followers, which is how most of you guys probably found me. So I wanted to get him a gift. Now, after filming in New York, I didn't fly home to Austin, Texas. Instead, I flew up to Toronto, Canada, and visited a company called Objects Unlimited. I knew I needed to go to these guys because the gift that I wanted to give Tony needed to be perfect. So I told him the idea. I wanted to turn him into his very own action figure as the Mystery Skater. They loved it. You see, normally for something like this, we would have Tony come up to Toronto and step in this machine. This has 128 DSLR cameras fully surrounding you. So you do a pose and they all fire off at the same time, turning you into a 3D object then and there. But we didn't have Tony in Toronto, and I also wanted this to be a surprise. So Objects Unlimited has some of the best designers in the game, where I sent them a bunch of footage from the New York trip where they'd be able to design as close as they could using the footage. We didn't want this to kind of look like him. We wanted you to immediately know that this is Tony Hawk. So they started with the face. Next, it was time for the Mystery Skater positioning. They started with this and slowly started to tweak his position, the way he was leaning, how he was turned, everything, so that this would be almost an exact photo match. I even sent them photos of Tony's board, which they utilized to make a replica with, starting with this, to then getting the shape, lengthening it, and then putting on the skin. Everything is extremely detailed, down to the creases in his clothing, the windswept suit jacket, even the tie clip. Once the 3D file was done, it was time to get this thing 3D printed. These are $250,000 each and are considered the Lamborghini of 3D printing. They don't have one, they don't have two, they've got 5. Now, once the print was done, we freed it from the build plate, and you can see here that it is fully covered in wax, something that will have to be removed. So, Evelyn goes in by hand, freeing as much of this wax as possible. This will then get recycled and reused for the next print, starting with a larger wooden knife, working their way down to a toothpick, freeing all that detail in Tony's face. Now that most of the wax is gone, it's time to do one last clean, and for this, they're gonna have a bath. Now, when those get cleaned up, we go across the hall to make another version, being made out of powder, whereas the ones you just saw were resin. Once the print was done, we freed the Mystery Skater Tony from the powder. And similar to the wax on the resin pieces, all of this powder has to be freed. So to do this, we use pressurized air to free it all. Now, similar to the resin print, it will need to be cleaned up by hand. So this is where Ryan comes in. Using a series of rotary tools, it gets a brush down to free up all that detail from that powder. And just like before, the tools will get finer, freeing up more and more of that tight area. Lastly, the piece will get washed with super glue. Since this is made of powder, this piece will fully absorb all this super glue, solidifying the inner core, as well as strengthening the outside and making all of the colors pop. Once it's been fully soaked in super glue, it'll get pat dried very, very gently, because essentially the entire inner core of this piece is powder. Perfect. Now going back across the hall, the resin pieces are done soaking, and they too will get a pat dry. However, they don't need to be as fragile with these, and they won't get that super glue bath, but they will need some time to dry. Once the pieces were all done, they got packaged up and sent down to me, which needless to say, I was so excited to see this, guys, because every time I work with Objects Unlimited, they over-deliver and absolutely knock it out of the park. Okay, next up, he's got to get to Tony. Come back tomorrow where I fly down to San Diego and actually give this piece to Tony Hawk himself. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.